Through the 3 years I've been working on the LEGO Minecraft series, the most popular suggestion by far has been to add a desert temple. There are requests for this specific structure dating back to March of 2022 in episode 3. Due to space constraints, I originally had to put aside the desert pyramid dream in favor of a massive village instead. But after a bit of thinking and measuring, I had an idea. What if we could still squeeze a temple in after all? Only one gap remains on the warm side of the display, but it turns out that it provides just enough space to fit the full facade of the temple. So thanks to all of you who persisted, because today we're finally going to be bringing the most requested module to life. Let's get to building. That back corner space gives us a 1x3 module to work with. That's going to be 24x8 in-game blocks. This module has more or less been out of sight, out of mind, directly behind the towering Mesa Badlands for years now. And speaking of the Badlands, there's a few changes I'd like to make to it while that module is out. When I originally made it back in 2022, I built the mineshaft to its exact game dimensions. That's going to be a 3x3 tunnel. However, that doesn't really scale well with minifigures at all. The next few mineshafts I ended up building for the underground modules were all scaled up slightly to 4x4 so that the figures could fit inside. You've seen this before in the dripstone caves and the ravine, and I think it's time to redo this one here too. Now this process ended up being way more involved than I thought. The work table was carnage as I had to gut the Badlands module to fit in these modifications. Since this was one of the earliest builds in the display, episode 6, I figured I could take this time to add a few other enhancements to it too, like some more ore in the walls. I've also always wanted to extend this mineshaft further back to the corner of the display, so I'll start laying that out in our new module too. Of course, I'm going to add the classic rail design where I can. The only downside of this technique is that it can only be built in sections of 4 blocks or 8 studs. Thankfully, that works pretty well for mineshafts though, where the rails are always randomly spread throughout the structure. Now, let's get what we have tiled off. I left those 1x2 jumpers in there so we could place a minecart chest. They're the best part of mineshafts after all, and where there's a chest minecart, there's probably an eager player. The changes are going to necessitate a rebuild of the bottommost layers of the mineshaft. I've ended up moving the mineshaft scaffolding a bit forward too to be a bit more noticeable. Unfortunately, this will likely affect the layer of sand red clay above it. If you've somehow missed me yapping about sand red before, suffice it to say that sand red is an extremely rare discontinued LEGO color. The limited selection of elements makes it pretty tricky to build with. That's why I'm so thankful to Hatsukataro, who sent over an absolutely massive sand red haul to use in the LEGO Minecraft world. This crazy amount of the color actually means we'll be able to have an accurate, smooth sand red roof above our mineshaft. How cool is that? Not that anyone will ever see it, but it's detail like that that I like to add into this display. The top half of the module is unchanged and can just sit right back into place. There's going to be a few new exposed sand red studs, but that's going to be an easy thing to fix with a small rocky peak added on top. In reality, it's kind of a small change, but the enlarged mineshaft is a lot more noticeable and feels a lot more realistic in our world full of LEGO minifigures. And I always love an excuse to add more sand red into the display too. With that, the Badlands module is now complete, and we can turn our sights to the module behind it. We have a lot of height to fill before we can even get to the surface, so for now, I'll continue working on the second half of the mineshaft. I want to fill this with a bunch of common surface level ores. With this module's corner spot, I'm thinking it'll get a lot of visibility, so I want it to be as interesting as possible on the inside. It feels like we're essentially creating an entire underground module here at this point. This is going to be another massive build. I'm very happy with how this is turning out so far. There's a lot going on, and it's much easier to see inside now thanks to the larger mineshaft size. I may need to adjust a few transition blocks in the skeleton dungeon module, which will go directly beneath this, but those modifications should be much easier to make than what we tackled today. The biggest advantage all this extra height in this module affords us is that we can now add a second underground element. the treasure room of the Desert Temple. And don't you worry, I've made sure to install a few explosives into the mechanism here at the bottom. I'm going to temporarily take out the Badlands module to provide better access to the module I'm actually building on. We've just got so much height to build up before we can even worry about lining things up on the surface. Some of my favorite builds in the series have incorporated functions, and I definitely want to add that here with the TNT trap. It's a simple enough mechanism, but I imagine it will be quite effective. I'll place 9 loose blocks in here to come flying out once it's activated. Don't worry, we'll take a look at it later in slow-mo. When it comes to the Minecraft desert, things tend to be a little one note in terms of the color palette. It's a lot of tan on tan on tan. As we've done before with other singularly colored structures like the witch hut, the solution here is to give the individual blocks a lot of texture. That's why I'll be repurposing a lot of the various sandstone designs we've come up with over the years here in this build. For once, I'm not too worried about running out of bricks. I've been gearing up for this build for quite some time, and I've always had a pretty ridiculous collection of tan ever since I made my 4-foot tall clock tower mock. I've got a video on that too if you're interested. I want the visual interest to extend to the walls of the terrain too. I'll add in a patch of andesite here to break up all the dark bluish gray. This particular block has shown up once before in the Cave Explorers module, and it has no shortage of great texture to work with either. Next, it's time to just build up that back support wall. I hope you enjoy all the funny decals I've included here. Let me know if you recognize any of these. Now that we're finally approaching the surface, I'll bring in the neighboring modules. Of course, we've got the familiar Mesa Badlands from earlier, but I'll also want to bring in the good old Jungle Temple to make sure that we match the terrain heights on the side. It's kind of fun having these two temples side by side here, and each build is equally loaded with underground goodies and secrets. And remember too that there will even be more underground modules beneath these both. I'll get the last few layers of terrain built up so we can finally be at the same level as the desert well. The whole process requires an insane amount of bricks to pull off. I find myself forgetting how ridiculous the scale of this project really is. The layers upon layers of bricks below provide a really sturdy foundation for our pyramid though. And I won't have to worry about accidentally having the model cave in on itself as I press down pieces from above. That'll save me some stress in the long run, and I'm all for that. Now let's settle back for some sweet tiling time. Much like the chamber below, I want there to be as much texture up top as possible. It should be easy to differentiate all these different tan blocks from one another. I'll begin the structure with its iconic entrance. Hopefully this will look pretty familiar to you. I've set aside a few pre-built blocks to make the building process a bit faster here. I had to make something like 30 cut sandstone blocks out of Lego, and it was kind of crazy. Very repetitive. I even ran out of tan rounded 2x2 plates and had to use some dots tiles instead. Never did I ever think I'd manage to go through all of those in my collection, but the plates have been used in quite a few models over the years. The detail of the sandstone blocks really helped the smooth pattern of the Ankh stand out all the more. The dark orange color of the stained clay works really nicely with the Mesa Badlands module next door. We'll have to repeat this pattern 3 more times, so good thing I've got lots of pieces to make it happen. I'll once again take away the neighboring modules here so that you can actually see what I'm doing. This is going to be a fun time lapse. Like I've done for other structures with cobblestone in the past, I'm randomly scattering the 1x1 pip texture throughout the build, rather than putting it everywhere for every single block for sandstone. If every block had the added texture, things would get very noisy very quickly. And then I'm not quite sure I'd have enough of those tiny pieces anyway. This solution looks far more appealing to me and leaves things feeling nicely balanced with flat surfaces and more detailed surfaces. The eagle-eyed among you may notice a few changes to the middle roof. Don't worry though, it's all intentional. This is just a way of getting more of that pyramid shape into our rather narrow cross section here. And I suppose we had better tile that roof off too. To finish off the exterior, we'll just need to add the tops of our towers. They make use of the trusty bracket stair design that we've used in many other builds up to this point. The resulting structure really does manage to capture the grandeur of the in-game temple. It feels massive here in the studio, and we haven't even built the whole thing. This will be quite fun for our players to find while exploring the world. The temple will end up being pretty well hidden too behind the Badlands peaks, but that does seem pretty realistic since more often than not these things are buried halfway underground in game. Now, let's add in some details. Of course, I'll bring back the cactus design with the elusive green grills, can never have too many of those. Thankfully, LEGO Minecraft sets have seemed to come with a lot more dead bushes lately, so I've got plenty of extras to add in here too. I've got lots of room for players in this build, and I've got lots of players to add, starting with Effie from the Animal Sanctuary. She's holding the rather rare diamond axe. Joining her is another 2024 figure, the Badlands Explorer. Seems a fitting location for her. When it comes to the interior, I'm going to pack the tower on the right with a bunch of zombies. I feel this happens all the time in these dark structures anyway. The other tower will have an Enderman, as I'm pretty sure we don't have any in the overworld quite yet. I'll add the Ice Castle's Royal Warrior on the inside, who's eager to find the treasure. She's joined by the pretty underprepared looking Ocelot skinned player, who's just munching on some bread she likely stole from the village. And at the bottom of the pit, I've got to add slightly distressed Steve, who may have accidentally stepped on a pressure plate. Oh dear. I think we all know what happens next. That was awesome. Finally, the desert temple module is complete. It's time to get this bad boy added into the rest of the display. This build finishes the warm side of the world once and for all. It's been a long time coming, and I hope the finished model lives up to the hype. Honestly though, next episode's going to be even cooler, and that's because we're taking on another highly requested module, the player base. This is easily one of my favorite builds in the display, and if you want to watch that episode early, you can do so right now by becoming a channel member. I wouldn't be able to make any of these episodes without the support of all the members already signed up, and I'd love to have you join in. In addition to early access to all of my videos, you'll also unlock the Cheesy Studios members only Discord and get tons of behind the scenes info and early updates on the Minecraft world and other projects. But anyway, thanks so much for tuning in today. Have yourself a great life, and I'll see you again soon.